Good evening, everyone. It is a Thursday evening, and I'm joined again by Tolly Wilgus. Thanks for coming on, buddy.
Absolutely. Glad you have me.
I've been maintaining that 2020 is off the hook. You agree with me?
What else hasn't happened to us, Mike? I'm about to stay sheltered in place for the whole year.
Yeah, I don't even need coronavirus anymore. I literally, I had one of my friends call me today. He texted me and he's like, "Did you hear about such and such?" And I'm like, "You can't do that in 2020.
No.
You literally, I can't text you and say, dude, did you hear about this? Because in 2020, you're going to think, did he die? Did the bridge collapse? Did
off the chain right now
join the NFL? It's crazy.
Hey, that would be dope. He'd help Cleveland out.
I don't think he would play for Cleveland. maybe the Rams. But thank you for joining us, Subversive Institute, tonight. And we're glad you're here. You know that we're all about equipping the citizens of Baltimore, empowering them as much as we can so that they can change their city. You know, we're a bottom-up organization, and we really believe, as we think it's being evidenced over and over and over again, that if you want to see change, you have to be part of that change. Tali has to be, the citizens have to change things. This is the way it's gone throughout all human history. All major sociological change for good comes from the bottom up, and we're no exception. So if we want to see change, we want to go from the bottom up. Tali, recently, something again happened, and in a way, this was even more egregious with the killing of Mr. Lloyd. What are just some of your thoughts on that before we get into some of the things we can actually do to see stuff like this changed?
Yeah, man, I was struck by just where we are as a society after all of these other egregious killings, that another black man, his life just seems to not be important enough to step in. You know, it's one thing. We talk about bad apples, and we talk about that they're good officers. And by the way, I know a lot of officers, love a lot of officers, have a ton of respect for officers. But that narrative starts to drift when you've got 4 officers. It's no longer one bad apple. It's a bad apple and some brothers who are standing around allowing that to take place. And one person stepping in that moment, one person being brave enough, one person putting his hand on his shoulder and saying, "Brother, get off of him. He's good. We got it." One person speaking up, even though it may have cost them their job. It may have cost them their pride. It might have been a hard situation for them to deal with at their in the car or on their job. But one person stepping up would have saved that man's life. And the biggest thing that struck me was there's systemic injustice. There's a lot going on there, but not even one person, not one person that could have done something did. And that troubles me as a society.
Yeah, it's horrible. And you can see the outpouring of people saying they're tired, they're angry. And right now, Minneapolis is on fire. I watched the press conference. I guess the district attorney came out and she basically gave her condolences, said she was sorry, but she wasn't ready right now to press charges, which I don't think would bring a lot of comfort, because based on what we see now, things seem pretty evident. She went on to say that she wants to make sure it doesn't become like a Freddie Gray issue, where they have, but it's drastic. And Tali, people are weighing in from Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, blogs, preaching. And, tell me what you think about this. I feel like there's a lot of analysis of the situation, but not necessarily, and that is totally understandable, but not necessarily like, here's what we can actually do to change it.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of people are looking through the prism of their own experience and what they know. And people are very quick to speak to what they know and what they believe about the circumstance, rather than what happened and how do we make sure it never happens again? To be honest, my friends are tired. I've never seen more exasperated feelings and emotions than I have with this most recent incident. And we're just coming off a few weeks ago where people felt it was okay to jump out with shotguns for a break-in, like and kill somebody. But this incident it's when people in authority, when people have position, when people have power over you, when they seem to go unchecked, it causes people to get out in the streets and to make some noise. But the bigger picture is that we can't have people in power, in control, who are not having the best interest of the citizens at heart.
Yeah, and it's crazy. What we want to get into tonight as a classic subversive thing that we do is we love analysis, we love grieving, we love mourning, we love crying. We're all about emoting, we're all about processing, getting our thoughts out, demonstrations, protests. That's part of our constitutional rights. But we also like change. And as we said a few weeks ago with the shooting in Georgia, there is a law on the books. It is legal for citizens to arrest and detain someone who they think may have committed a crime. And so the men who apprehended and shot that man were operating under that law. And so one of the things that has to happen if we're going to really see change is we're going to have to address the issues that are kind of creating the environment for these types of things to happen. And that means we have to get into real distinct action items to see change. And so we want to offer you some things to think through. Maybe you guys will have questions about this, maybe you'll agree, maybe you'll disagree. But we really believe these are the types of things that if the citizens get mobilized and do these 10 things, even some of these 10 things, you're going to see change, like real change, not just people coming out and talking and wearing t-shirts and saying their condolences, but I mean systemic changes in institutions like police departments. And so the first one is commit to doing whatever it takes to change any law that creates an environment for injustice. You commit to doing whatever it takes to change any law that creates an environment for injustice. And so there are actually laws on the books, Tolly, that facilitate systemic injustice. And I think one of those laws we saw in the Georgia case.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like I said about a person having the ability or to think that it's okay to chase someone down. And in that case, get in front of them, stand in front of them out of your vehicle with a weapon. At that point, to have that type of law on the books, you're inviting these types of confrontations. You're asking for trouble with those kind of laws. But the reality is that many of us, we're not educated on even those kind of laws. One of the first things you saw in that discussion was that people just felt like the act itself was criminal. And unfortunately, this is how people get off. The act is actually in the books. And if you want change to those types of behaviors, you've got to change the law. You got to get involved and you got to know what's going on.
Yeah, and I know we've had this conversation many times. I've gone around Baltimore and asked probably hundreds of people at this point, how does a law get passed in Baltimore City? And very few people know the process. And if you go Googling it and looking it up, it's very difficult to find, which I find very interesting. It's like it's a secret thing, but that's not a good thing, Tolly. It's not a good thing when we don't know what the laws are, we don't know how they're created, we don't know how they're passed, and we don't know how to get rid of them. That is a formula for systemic injustices. That's a formula for sociological dysfunction. And if we really want to see some things change, we can't rely on the people we vote in office to take care of this, because newsflash, they're not.
Yeah. No, they're absolutely not. And as you know, my story, Mike, I grew up in East Baltimore in O'Donnell Heights housing projects. And when I look around at my young adulthood, one of the questions that I got most pervasively was, how did you make it out? What is different about the circumstances you were raised in and kind of where you are now? And frankly, it was education, and it was awareness. I don't know if you've ever messed with Plato's Republic. My undergrad is in government and law, and you're forced to read that. But one of the things that Socrates in the Republic wrestles with is exactly what is justice. We talk about what is an injustice, but really what we're saying is it's just not right. And there's something that's on the human heart that knows what is right and what is wrong. And Plato wrestles with this through Socrates, and he comes up with essentially three areas that society should be just. He says that education of our children, it's a justice issue on how we educate, or if we do educate our children. The second thing he talks about is what roles should people play in society? Who should be doing what? Who should make what calls? And then who should rule that society? So what role for the citizens is there? What role is there for leaders? But all of that funnels back to education. And frankly, I think when you tell me that you've got to go searching the interwebs to find out how to make a law in your own city, well, that's not very educating to your citizenry. And you got to think about it. Why do they care about you being educated? Because if you'll just keep doing the same thing and keep voting for the same people, they don't need you to be up on anything. And that's the sad part. We have to start with education of our people.
Yeah, and I just really believe this, that if you're listening right now and you bought into what I believe is a lie, that in order to see things changed, like Floyd's death, you need to vote the right people in. Well, we've been doing that for decades, and how's that going?
Yeah.
How's that going? Like, people are fallible. They're going to need more than just trying to put someone in place. At some point, the citizenship, Tali, has to take responsibility for their communities. We've abdicated. We've given over the environment in our community to political leaders, believing that somehow that they're going to take care of us, when we actually have a nation that entrusts the power of the community to the citizens. So
Absolutely.
We're just like giving it to them.
Absolutely. And that's where marginalization begins. If you want to talk about an unjust society, if you want to talk about a have and a have not, if you want to talk about classism, any ism, racism, sexism, if you, all of that comes down to marginalization. And how do you marginalize a people? You don't educate them. You keep them in the dark. You pretend that there's a secret society that makes law, and you tell them that you're the savior. Just vote for me, and that's all you need to do. Be as lazy as you want for the other 4 years. I'll come back around. I'll give you some treats, and I'll ask you to go ahead and vote for me, and I'll take care of all your problems. We have been addicted to this apathetic system, and we are responsible for our own marginalization. And the reality is that you have to become aware, you have to become educated, and you have to understand that there's not some separate class who can take care of you better than you can as an individual citizen in your society.
Yeah, and that leads to number two. What can you do to really bring about substantive change? I'm not talking about getting on CNN and talking, but I'm talking about significantly reducing the amount of unarmed Black men being killed in the country. First, commit to doing whatever it takes to change any laws that create an environment for injustice. But secondly, y'all got to vote regularly, but you got to vote differently. We've been saying this for the last few weeks, Tali. It's like, if you just want your sticker, I'll mail you a sticker. Just email Subversive Institute if you just want a sticker, and do us a favor. Don't go to the polls and don't vote. I said it. Because if you vote for the same people who have the same policies and the same political parties who have put us into this mess and refuse to get us out, you are complicit. You are. Voting isn't some angelic thing. It's supposed to give voice to the voiceless, but it only works if you actually vote for people who are going to do something.
And you have to know what it is that you'd like to see done. Unfortunately, a lot of the way people vote is the way they pick out a lotto ticket at 7-Eleven. They walk in and they scratch a few things. They don't really know what the answer is. They just hope that it works out. They hope that they hit the lotto and the right person will do the right thing. But you have to inform yourself about who it is that's running. Character matters. Their history matters. Do they have a real track record to speak of? You have to be able to understand that I'm not voting up and down for the R's or up and down for the D's. I'm going to walk in and I'm going to find out who is the best person for this particular set of experience needs that we have. You have to understand what's going on. How does the structure work? What is the office that they seek? And unfortunately, Mike, for a lot of people, you're right. It would be better if they didn't go ahead and vote, because they continue to be a part of a system that marginalizes people that are thinking and walking through the process themselves.
And remember, the enemy of change is comfort. So yeah. I just believe that if you're voting for a person who's like that evening cupcake, then you're probably not voting for change. If the candidate you're voting for doesn't make you uncomfortable in some place, that's not a catalytic person. That's not someone who's going to change. We should be a little bit uncomfortable. People should be edgy. They should have new ideas. If they have talking points, we did this before where last week we went through the crime plans of the top 3 mayors in Baltimore. That's all it was. This is talking points. Comprehensive plans. Comprehensive plans. That's what we hear about. That's supposed to impress me. But when you read that comprehensive plans, they can't specify anything. I'm going to reduce crime. How? How are you going to pay for it? I'm going to get more police officers. Mayors have been saying that for a decade. No one's been able to do it. Tell me how you're going to motivate people to actually want to work in Baltimore City when they're fleeing by the dozens. Like, I'm not asking for a research paper, Tolly. I'm asking for you to be honest with me. So you don't get my vote. You don't get my vote. You don't get my vote. And I'm going to vote for somebody who people say, that person's not going to win. Well, my voting ain't charity, Tolly. I want to vote for somebody who I think is really going to change this unjust system that creates an environment for injustices like Lloyd.
I think people treat voting like picking their favorite sports team sometimes. I don't know if you remember when we were younger, the Golden State Warriors jersey was the jersey nobody wanted to wear. Like, why would you ever wear a Warriors jersey, right? But you had to be a real fan if you were going to put that on. And then suddenly, all of a sudden, you get a few wins under your belt, and I want to be on that team. We treat voting that way, and the reality is that the politicians understand that you're going to sway to whatever the movement is at the moment. But I like what you're talking about. What you're talking about is being different, being an informed citizen, sitting down and understanding the policies, asking yourself the basic questions of how would you do this. Sometimes we look at these budgets and we just figure, wow, they must know more than me. No. Take that budget, break it down into numbers for your household, and ask yourself if it makes sense. Ask yourself if you could continue to live off of that style of a budget. You could do this with every area of government. You just have to sit down and process yourself. But it takes time. You got to get rid of voter apathy. You've got to decide to be an informed citizen. And you really got to take ownership for where you live, no matter where you live, but especially here in a city like Baltimore. You've got to care.
Yeah. Number 3, redirect our emotions, our energy, the words, posts, and behaviors towards actions that will actually create substantive change. And this is really at the core of kind of what it means, I think, to be subversive. It means to make your actions count. And again, we refer to this in terms of voting, of just clicking all the Democrats or clicking all the Republicans and just going through the motions. But what does it look like to emote, to think, to behave in such a way that at the end of a year of that, there's actual change, Tolly? What does it look like to be so intentional, so purposeful that there's change? A lot of us are tired of seeing the injustices, but how many of us have grown tired that there's no change? Like, we do acknowledge that, right? There's no change. Like, how many more videos do we need to see of this? So what I want to see is, I want to see like radical change. I want some police departments, maybe every police department in the United States, completely replaced. People go, oh, that's crazy. It's not crazy. Like, why not rework the whole department? You know, I was telling my daughter earlier today, you rarely hear of doctors and nurses, like during the COVID-19, Tolly, you rarely heard them say, I'm not going to the hospital. It's dangerous. I could die. I could get COVID and die. Right? You don't really hear them saying, I gotta protect myself. I'm not putting myself in danger. You know what you hear police officers say? I'm not putting myself in danger. I gotta protect myself. May I suggest that we've lowered the bar too much when it comes to law enforcement? Do I want cops to just lay down and be shot readily? No, but this is what I believe. I believe if you want change, you got to go into a system like the police department and start asking men to say, I want you to actually put others first. So if someone's going to die in that scene, maybe it ought to be you. You're there to protect and serve. People say, oh, that's radical and that's this. That's the kind of changes we're going to need, because otherwise we create a culture of me first, with a gun, with a badge, with unions, with laws where you're not penetrated. And it's chaos, man.
No, I agree. I think losing, when you say elevating the police, part of it, think about it, in every job, in every facet of life, Mike, we get what we pay for. Part of what we're getting we're asking people to go into dangerous situations, to, in some cases, not have the law have their back. And what's happening is that they don't feel like they have the protection or the backing from their higher ups in the office. And so the good ones, the good guys that we talk about, the great men and women that we do know in law enforcement, they're doing what you or I would do. They're looking around and they're saying, does this city, this community, does it care for me? Does it care for me? How best do you know whether or not a group of people care for you when you're on the job? Your salary. Are you paying me enough? When you use the illustration of a doctor to a police officer, I think it's fair. But remember, that doctor is making a significant salary to go in there and to risk their life every day. The police officer, I just did a quick Google search. $51,000 is get you the chance to run into Baltimore City right now and take some bullets flying by your head. $51,000 gets you the opportunity of having a bounty put out on you or your family's life. And we have to be real about this on both sides of it. We look and we just say, man, that guy's a terrible human. Well, what did we do with the good ones? what are we doing with the guys that would love to be in there and would love to do the right thing? But we can't take honorable people. All the time I see people, they want Superman, but they try to pay you like Clark Kent. And so I think we got to get to the place to where we're willing to get the right people in there, treat them with respect and dignity. And really then the ability to fire becomes a whole lot of a bigger challenge, don't you think? If I'm making a little bit more money than I would make elsewhere, I think it might be worth it. I've talked about hazard pay for a long, long time in different fields. And this is certainly one field where I think hazard pay would apply. Get good people in there, take care of them well, and make them want to be there on the job. Otherwise, it's going to go to the lowest common denominator, and who's ever willing to throw on a badge and run around and play rent-a-cop.
Yeah, we just want to encourage you to, whatever you're doing, ask yourself, if I do this for a year, will it bring about change? If the answer is no, stop doing it. Abandon it. And do something that at the end of 12 months of activity would bring about change. Number 4, and a lot of you aren't going to agree with this, but we're talking about change. Participate in fiscal, institutional, and organizational boycotts. So we know from our history that boycotts have worked when they're strategic and intentional. We know that nonviolent boycotts have worked in history. And I just believe that most people don't change until they feel the pain. It's just reality. They just don't. They don't change until they feel the pain. And so at some point, we have to give a voice to our frustrations, a voice to our desire to see change. And one of those ways, not the only way, is to participate in a fiscal or an institutional organizational boycott. You know, I said this for a long time, and I know a lot of people don't like me saying this, but Tolly, you're from Baltimore. You went to school here. My kids went to Baltimore City schools. And I've said to students all the time when they complain to me, I said, organize a boycott of the school. Like, especially during park tests when they test for the feds to get their money. And I'm like, you have to send a message that not being able to drink the water, not having adequate textbooks, having teachers have to buy their own supplies, like all these, not having air conditioners. At some point, I want to encourage the young students to take responsibility, not for the mess, but for the solution, and say, make North Avenue, in our case in Baltimore City, feel the pain, feel your frustration. How do I do that? I'm just a 17-year-old kid. Walk out. You guys have Twitter, you have Instagram, you have Facebook. During Freddie Gray, y'all walked out. Like, okay, what about sizing that up? And don't tell North Avenue what you're going to do. I'm teaching the young people how to be subversive right now, Tolly. Don't tell them. Keep it all secret and do it pointedly and state what you want from them. And tell them, look, I'm willing to sit out a week or two of school and miss these standardized tests by which you guys get paid in order to send you a message.
Yeah, I think back when you would mention this, I think back to what was MLK's last speech. Where was he? He was in Memphis. Why was he in Memphis? He was there for the sanitation workers who were going on strike. They weren't being treated correctly. They weren't being treated right. That's where he gave his speech, talking about, I might not get there with you. And as we think about that, we think about his arc of justice, right? I was looking into that because a lot of us, we look at that and we just say, man, the arc of justice, it's just going to bend. Eventually it'll all work out. It'll all get there, Mike. The arc of justice is going to bend. It's going to bend towards justice. The reality is that he took that actually from a different preacher in 1853, and he added there was more context on it. And it says this: the arc of justice was the abolitionist minister Theodore Parker. But here's what he said: I do not pretend to understand the moral universe. The arc is a long one. My eye reaches but a little ways. I cannot calculate the curve and complete the figure by experience of sight. I can divine it by conscience. And from what I see, I'm sure it bends towards justice. The challenge is that when we just observe the idea that, oh, well, it'll all be okay eventually, things will all work out eventually, that creates apathy in us. But the same Martin Luther King, who said, you know what, the arc is going to bend towards justice, was in the middle of bending the arc. He was in the middle of doing things that caused people to behave appropriately. And we've got to be willing to do the same thing. And by the way, on the Freddie Gray deal, that I'm not sure if you recall, but there was a movie that was out at the same time. And the kids had started to text in the Twitter about meeting outside of school for that, to kind of show off this rampage type of an atmosphere. So the idea of organizing and skipping school and coming out, that is being done for other reasons. Let's use it for the good reason. Let's use it to bend that arc a little bit so we can get where we wanted to as a society.
Yeah. Sean Dallaire says, you're right, Sean Dallaire, you mess with someone's money and you'll get their attention quick. And you're right, Julie, we have so much power. And when you talk about fiscal boycotts, Tolly, I'm going to tell you right now, I said this before, people don't like it, but the mayor of our city and the mayor of Minnesota wasn't afraid of those citizens. He is now. Yeah. He's afraid now. You know how I know he's afraid? He called in the guard. Why is he afraid now? Because now he saw them looting. Now he saw them, quote unquote, rioting. Now he sees them participating in all these things. Now he sees them. So now he's afraid. My thing, Tolly, is we can always send a message to the mayors, to the governors, to the city councils. And so I said this before, if you could get 10, 15, 20, 30,000 people to all agree a weekend this fall that they're going to boycott, they're not going to shop in Baltimore City. Now you're going to hurt people, but Tolly, like we've got to do something to send a message in some fashion, whether it's fiscal organizational or institutional. We've got to be intentional about our efforts, because if all we do is complain and kind of talk about how bad it is, nothing's ever going to change. We've got to be involved in things that get the leader's attention.
Yeah, people control you when they know that you will allow them to. And I'm not in favor of an ongoing anarchist society where we're all, disrespecting all forms of all authority. That's a whole different ballgame. What we're talking about here is a specific and measurable goal. The funny thing about that, I don't know if you saw my social media blow up the last couple of days, but I reminded my Caucasian friends that these riots, what happens is there's a lot of deflection that goes on. So you have a murder of a black man, and then inevitably, if there becomes, and I remember most distinguishedly the Freddie Gray riots here in Baltimore, but inevitably, what people do at home is they go, look at those angry people. And look at what they're doing. I remember seeing one fire, Mike, on one trash can up on North Avenue. I remember seeing all the national media play this one trash can for 30 minutes on loop. And what that does is that creates in us, especially if you're Caucasian, it creates in us an ability to separate yourself from the problem and just say, well, it all washes out. There's bad people on both sides, right? And what happens is you distinguish yourself and you separate yourself and you say, I don't have to do anything about it. But my friends, we do have to do something about it. We do have to say my brother and sister is valuable. We do have to say education and clean drinking water at school is a demand. It's a necessity. It's a right. We do have to look at the budgets and just say, what are we spending money on if we're not spending it on a better police system, a better equity for our children in education? We do have to ask these questions and engage to bend that mark of justice I was talking about.
I love your post today because you posted a picture of of some rioters hundreds of years ago, and you reminded people of the scene. And I always like to remind people, and again, people don't like this, but America was founded on revolution. It was founded on, you're not gonna tell me what to do. It was founded on, that's unjust. It was founded on, we're going to write our own thing. We're going to rebel. We're going to create an environment. Oh, that's right, where we can pursue life, liberty, and happiness. I somewhere I read that.
Dude,
and
you
so
read
when
you read
people,
the first Civil War. We've had two Civil Wars. Do you realize that?
Yes.
This group of people have had two Civil Wars. We all talk about the second Civil War. But there was a first Civil War when we were a part of the United Kingdom. And there was a civil war for the independence and the rights of these people. And then the second Civil War, we call that a civil war. But no, we've been through two. This nation is founded on standing up and saying enough's enough. Things are going to change. And unfortunately, you just have to at some point. And this idea that we just stay in line and we follow the leader like a pack of ducks is crazy. You do have to stand up and say, listen, that's not right. It's wrong. Yeah.
And I just want people to understand that from all spheres, that if we're going to be constitutional led, and we're not Rome and we're not North Korea, revolution's in our DNA. It's part of who we are. It's in all of our documents. The right to protest, the free speech, the right to freely assemble, the fact that the Congress shall make no law in which infringes upon religious liberties. All those things are ours. And so when we have a man clearly murdered on TV, like, I'm all for, like, Minnesotans mobilize fiscal, institutional, organizational boycotts. If they open up schools in Minnesota and they haven't brought charges to these guys, keep your kids home. Like, no, here's the thing, Tolly, here's the thing. Everything in life that's valuable costs you something. Yeah. If you want a Bugatti, you can't buy it for $2. You know what I'm saying? If a woman wants to have a child, it hurts. Everything in life that's valuable costs you something. Somehow we got deluded into thinking that we can change we can change the trajectory of the killing of unarmed black men by doing nothing.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work that way. Every sociological movement that has changed human history for good costs people their lives. Jail time, persecution, and we're not going to get away with it. If we want this change, we're going to have to participate in some stuff.
Yeah, and I think go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, some of the energy that we saw just yesterday and even today with the rioting, imagine what that force of energy could be if there's a particular list of demands given to the mayor. Imagine what could happen. I also saw some news channels go to the scene, and we're kind of taught to just placate governing authority at this point. To the point to where the news anchor was asking, why are you here? Why can't you just wait to see what will happen and how it turns out? In the meantime, you have 4 cops that are home checking out, handling their finances. They're calling their attorneys. They're getting their story straight. And you or I, Mike, would have never had that opportunity to be able to get our story straight, or to have the opportunity to think it all through and to get my lawyers on it. We wouldn't have had all of that. So we're at a place to where even the media is looking and saying, gee, why don't you just go home and wait for something good to happen out of all this? We can't.
Do you think if someone was filming a white police officer in handcuffs being kneed by an African-American man with 4 black men standing around watching him die? You know, we had an officer shot in Baltimore City a few days ago, right? He was shot. You know what they declared? A manhunt. It's like, yo, what? And you know what? I've never seen, I'm not saying they don't have it, but you know what I haven't seen yet, Tolly? Haven't seen video. We have multiple video streams from this. Multiple. They say he wasn't compliant. It doesn't look like that was true. They say this. It doesn't look. So they got all this stuff. So here's the thing. So at what point do we as a citizenship say, okay, I understand where you're going. We're going a different way. You want us to just comply and go home and go buy our chicken boxes and go to McDonald's and put our kids in school and vote D or vote R and carry on. Guess what? We're not. You're going to hear us. We are going to participate in intentional behaviors that are subversive in nature. They're designed to bring our governing authorities discomfort, pain, and to mobilize. I agree with you. All that energy, if it was really pointed and harnessed, we could do so much. Let me get to number 5, and that is replace defective systems and structures. Now, you know, I've said this time and time again, Tolly, and I just believe this. Like, I think when we get to things like this, like the killing of Lloyd, the unarmed black men, and so many of the injustices, we need revolution and not reform. Reform is when you work within the systems and structures. Revolution is when you replace them. Bro, there's just some things that you can't fix them with water and vitamins and a glass of orange juice. You have to literally deconstruct them and rebuild them. And there's so many good-hearted people, Tolly, who disagree with me, and they want to go in there and they want to, you know, they want to play nurse, and they want to, you know, bring in the waters and the chips and the PBJs and sit down and counsel. And it's like, so how long do we do that? Like, haven't we been doing that for a decade, 2, 3 decades? The system's broken, Tolly. It's literally broken. And it's like, I've told this story so many times. It's like, if I got a broken car, you know, which I've had, I took my car to the dealership and they're like, look, at this point, to put a new engine in this thing, you might as well just get another car. You know, everything's breaking in your car. And it's like, do I reform it? Do I replace it? It's like, look, if you reform this, you're going to be fixing this thing forever. Tyler, we're not talking about cars. We're talking about human lives. We're talking about people who are being murdered, and people want to reform. I don't want reform. I want revolution. I want the police department in Minnesota and Baltimore and Chicago and Detroit and Atlanta and LA and every other city, Boston, New York, to look differently. I want it to sound differently. I want it to feel differently. I want it different. And why can't we have it different? Like, it's been producing the same injustices forever. We need revolution.
Yeah, I think people are scared of the word, but they don't fully understand what it means. I talked to a friend years ago, and his job was to turn around supermarkets. Essentially, they would move him from one district to another where there was a bad performing supermarket. And I asked him, I said, can you sum up for me, like, what do you do when you walk in? Like, do you tweak systems? Do you tweak people? He said, no, it's Ollie. You know what I do in every single supermarket to turn it around? I fire everyone.
Yeah.
We start over.
Yes.
We don't have the same manager leading the same cashiers and the same dirty shelves. We don't do that. We start over. You submit your resignation, and then we can build. And you might get your job back if you can show that you're worthy. The reality is that that's what voting is supposed to be. It's supposed to be the citizenry coming together and saying, you know what, we're starting over. But here in Baltimore City, especially, we simply elect. We do all of that in the primaries, and we end up with people that barely bring in. Zeke Cohen got 2,100 votes in his primary. 2,100. He got 27% of his voter base out of that primary. And you know what? Because he's got the correct initial next to his name, free pass in the general. You got Isaac. He got 33.75%. Leon Pickett got 24% of his district. 2,000 votes got this dude in. And you know why? When you get to the general, easy pickings, because you know why? There's nobody there to compete. You're not competing about ideas in the general. At that point, all you're doing is just saying who's got the D, who's got the R, and we're done. And I really believe if you want new systems and new structures, you've got to be able to go in and say, we're starting over. This stuff wasn't handed down to us by God. This was a people in a different generation who decided this is how the game would be played. Well, I'm sorry. We don't like how the game is being played. We're starting a new game.
I agree wholeheartedly. I've said it before. I think Baltimore should totally rebuild. I think we should get rid of the office of mayor. I think we should be governed by a board. I think we should get rid of the office of police. Having this chief of police. I mean, I've been here 11 years. How many chief of police we had, Tolly? 5?
We've had 5 in the last 6 years.
I mean, it's like, at what point do we, Tolly, just reason with me. At what point do we go, maybe that doesn't work? Like, could we possibly have a different way to oversee the police department? Yes.
Well, if we do that, like, somebody's going to lose.
Anything.
Somebody's going to lose a $285,000 a year job. So you be careful talking like that.
Yeah, well, I would rather someone lose a $285,000 job and save some lives on the streets rather than to keep the same systems, the same structures, the same people, vote the same way, and then be on here again next year talking about the same things, trying to urge people to be subversive, which basically just means we got to think, act, feel differently. We can't keep doing the same things and expect different results. We're going to end up in the same place, Todd. We got to have actions that produce substantive change. And to do that, you got to fire everybody. You know, we have on the Subversive Institute website, we have a solution called the Leadership Replacement Act. It calls for the mayor and all of city council to resign. They should all resign. I mean, they should all resign. We don't have anything personal against them. It's just they're not doing a good job running the city, Tolly. They should just resign. Let's put new people in there. And at this point, I said this before, Tolly, I would close my eyes. You could drive me around Baltimore, and I would just blindly pick people. And I guarantee you I could put 15 people in office. One is mayor, 15 city council, 16 people, and they do a better job at the city. I want people with no political experience, because everyone we hire with political experience leads us to where we are. Murder rates the same, education's horrible, economic opportunities are being pimped out to large corporations, streets got potholes, can't drink the water at school, the justice system is flawed. I mean, it's insane. And so we just want to encourage you all that there are some things we can do. We went over 5 things tonight. I'm gonna ask Talik, would you come back another time? We can hit the other 5.
Absolutely.
Yes. All right, we'll hit the
Absolutely.
other 5. But we appreciate you guys coming. Tune in next time. We're going to deal with number 6 through 10 of the things you can do to bring about change. So thanks for joining us tonight. Thanks, Tali. We'll look forward to doing this again. Grace and peace, y'all.